Vämana-avatära. Chalayasi vikramane balimmad bhuttavamana. Padanakhanira janita janapavana. Keshavadritta vamana rupa. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. O Keshav, O Lord of the universe, O Lord Hari, who have assumed the form of a dwarf Brahman, all glories to you. O wonderful dwarf, by your massive steps you deceive King Bali, and by the Ganges water that has emanated from the nails of your lotus feet, you deliver all living beings within this world. This recitation is based on the chapter summaries of the Shreemad-Bhägavatam 8th Canto, as given to us by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedänta Swami Prabhupäda. Chapter 15. Bali Maharaj conquers the heavenly planets. This chapter describes how Bali, after performing the Vishvajit Yajna, received the benediction of a chariot and various kinds of paraphernalia for war, with which he attacked the King of Heaven. All the demigods, being afraid of him, left the heavenly planets and went away, following the instructions of their guru. In this chapter we learn how Shukracharya brought Bali Maharaj back to life. There is also a description of Indra's capital city. No one who is sinful, envious, violent toward other living entities, cunning, falsely proud, lusty, or greedy can enter that city. Thus the people who live there are all devoid of these faults. Brihaspati, the guru of the demigods, also advises Indra to become incognito, and Bali Maharaj performs 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices. Maharaj Parikshit wanted to understand how Lord Vamana-Dev, on the plea of taking 3 paces of land from Bali Maharaj, took everything away from him and arrested him. Shukadeva Goswami responded to this inquiry with the following explanation. In the fight between the demons and the demigods, as described in the 11th chapter of this 8th canto, Bali was defeated, and he died in the fight. But by the grace of Shukracharya, he regained his life. Thus he engaged himself in the service of Shukracharya, his spiritual master. The descendants of Bhrigu, being pleased with him, engaged him in the Vishvajit Yajna. When this yajna was performed, from the fire of the yajna came a chariot, horses, a flag, a bow, armor, and 2 quivers of arrows. Maharaj Prahlad, Bali Maharaj's grandfather, gave Bali an eternal garland of flowers, and Shukracharya gave him a conch shell. Bali Maharaj, after offering obeisances to Prahlad, the Brahmins, and his spiritual master Shukracharya, equipped himself to fight with Indra, and then went to Indrapuri with his soldiers. Blowing his conch shell, he attacked the outskirts of Indra's kingdom. When Indra saw Bali Maharaj's prowess, he went to his own spiritual master, Brihaspati, told him about Bali's strength and inquired about his duty. Brihaspati informed the demigods that because Bali had been endowed with extraordinary power by the Brahmins, the demigods could not fight with him. Their only hope was to gain the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, there was no alternative. Under the circumstances, Brihaspati advised the demigods to leave the heavenly planets and keep themselves somewhere invisible. The demigods followed his orders, and Bali Maharaj, along with his associates, gained the entire kingdom of Indra. The descendants of Bhrigu Muni, being very affectionate to their disciple Bali Maharaj, engaged him in performing 100 Ashvamedha Yagyas. In this way, Bali enjoyed the opulences of the heavenly planets. Chapter 16. Executing the Payovrat process of worship. As described in this chapter, because Aditi, the mother of the demigods, was very afflicted, her husband Kashyapa Muni told her how to observe vows and austerities for the benefits of her sons. There is an interesting conversation between Aditi and Kashyapa, and Kashyapa instructs Aditi how to execute the Payovrat process of worshipping Lord Narayan. When Kashyapa Muni was requested by Aditi, he slightly smiled. Alas, how powerful is the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, by which the entire world is bound by affection for children. Since the demigods were not visible in the heavenly kingdom, their mother Aditi, because of separation from them, was very much aggrieved. One day, after many years, the great sage Kashyapa emerged from a trance of meditation and returned to his ashram. He saw that the ashram was no longer beautiful and that his wife was very morose. Everywhere in the ashram, he saw signs of lamentation. The great sage, therefore, inquired from his wife about the well-being of the ashram and asked her why she looked so morose. After Aditi informed Kashyapa Muni about the ashram's well-being, she told him that she was lamenting for the absence of her sons. She then requested him to tell her how her sons could return and reoccupy their positions. She simply wanted all good fortune for her sons. Moved by Aditi's request, Kashyapa Muni instructed her in the philosophy of self-realization, the difference between matter and spirit, and how to be unaffected by material loss. But when he saw that Aditi was not satisfied, even after he had given these instructions, he advised her to worship Vasudeva, Janardana. He assured her that only Lord Vasudeva could satisfy her and fulfill all her desires. When Aditi then expressed her desire to worship Lord Janardana, Prajapati Kashyapa told her about a process of worship known as Payovrata, which is executed in 12 days. Lord Brahma had instructed Kashyapa how to satisfy Lord Krishna by this process, and thus he advised his wife to observe this vow and its regulative principles. Chapter 17. The Supreme Lord agrees to become Aditi's son. As explained in this chapter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being very pleased by the Payovrata ceremony performed by Aditi, appeared before her in full opulence. At her request, the Lord agreed to become her son. In this chapter, there is a conversation between Aditi and Lord Vishnu, as well as Lord Brahma's prayers to Lord Vishnu in the womb of Aditi. The Lord advised Aditi as follows: always thinking of me as being situated within the body of your husband, Kashyapa, go, worship your husband. He has been purified by austerity. The Lord also warned Aditi, O lady, even if someone inquires, you should not disclose this fact to anyone, because that which is very confidential is successful only if kept secret. After Aditi performed the Payovrata ceremony for 12 continuous days, the Lord, who was certainly very pleased with her, appeared before her with 4 hands and dressed in yellow garments. As soon as Aditi saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead present before her, she immediately got up and, with great ecstatic love for the Lord, fell to the ground to offer respectful obeisances. Aditi's throat was choked because of ecstatic feelings, and her entire body trembled with devotion. Although she wanted to offer suitable prayers to the Lord, she could not do anything. And thus she remained silent for some time. Then, feeling solace, observing the beauty of the Lord, she offered her prayers. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul of all living entities, was very pleased with her and agreed to become her son, incarnating as a plenary expansion. He was already pleased with Kashyapa Muni's austerities, and thus he agreed to become their son and maintain the demigods. After giving his word of honor to this effect, the Lord disappeared. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Aditi engaged in the service of Kashyapa Muni, who could then see by samadhi that the Lord was within him. And thus Kashyapa placed his semen in the womb of his wife, Aditi. Lord Brahma, who is also known as Hiranyagarbha, understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead had entered Aditi's womb. Thus, Lord Brahma offered prayers to the Lord. Chapter 18. Lord Vämana-Deva, the dwarf incarnation. This chapter describes how Lord Vämana-Deva appeared and how he went to the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Bali, who received him well and fulfilled his desire by offering him benedictions. This chapter nicely describes how Vamana was properly worshipped by the demigods upon his appearance, and the cordial conversation between Bali Maharaj and Vamana-Dev. Lord Vamana appeared in this world from the womb of Aditi, completely equipped with conch shell, disc, club, and lotus. His bodily hue was blackish, and he was dressed in yellow garments. Lord Vishnu appeared at an auspicious moment on the Shravana Dvadasi, when the Abhijit star had arisen. At that time, in all the three worlds, including the higher planetary system, outer space, and this earth, all the demigods, cows, Brahmins, and even the seasons were happy because of God's appearance. Therefore, this auspicious day is called Vijaya, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has a Satchit Ananda body, appeared as the son of Kashyapa and Aditi. Both of his parents were very astonished. After his appearance, the Lord assumed the form of a dwarf, Vamana. All the great sages expressed their jubilation, and with Kashyapa Muni before them, they performed the birthday ceremony of Lord Vaman. At the time of Vamana-Deva's sacred thread ceremony, he was honored by the sun god, Brihaspati, the goddess presiding over the planet Earth, the deity of the heavenly planets, his own mother, Lord Brahma, Kuvera, the 7 rishis, and others. Vamana-Deva then visited the sacrificial arena on the northern side of the Narmada River at the field known as Bhrigu Kacha, where Brahmins of the Bhrigu dynasty were performing yajnas. Wearing a belt made of munja straw, an upper garment of deerskin, and a sacred thread, and carrying in his hands a danda, umbrella, and water pot or kamandalu, Vamana-Deva appeared in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Bali. Because of his transcendentally effulgent presence, all the priests were diminished in their prowess, and thus they all stood from their seats and offered prayers to Lord Vamana. When Lord Shiva accepts on his head the Ganges water generated from the toe of Lord Vamana. Therefore, after washing the Lord's feet, Bali Maharaj immediately accepted the water from the Lord's feet on his head, and Bali felt that he and his predecessors had certainly been glorified. Then Bali Maharaj inquired of Vamana-Deva's welfare and requested the Lord to ask from him money, jewels, or anything else he may desire. Chapter 19. Lord Vamana begs charity from Bali Maharaj. This 19th chapter describes how Vamana-Deva asked for 3 paces of land in charity, how Bali Maharaj agreed to the proposal, and how Shukracharya forbade Bali Maharaj to fulfill Lord Vamana's request. After Vamana-Deva glorified Bali Maharaj's ancestry, the Lord made his request. I ask only 3 paces of land. However, Bali's guru, Sukracharya, disagreed, and thus advised his disciple not to keep his promise to give charity to this dwarf Brahman who was actually Lord Vishnu in disguise. When Bali Maharaj, thinking Vämana-Deva to be the son of a Brahmin, told him to ask for anything he liked, Vämana-Deva praised Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha for their heroic activities. And after thus praising the family in which Bali Maharaj had been born, the Lord begged the king for 3 paces of land. When Bali said that the Lord should ask for something greater, the personality of Godhead replied, "O my dear king, even the entirety of whatever there may be within the 3 worlds to satisfy one's senses cannot satisfy a person whose senses are uncontrolled. Therefore, one should be satisfied with whatever one achieves by one's previous destiny. Discontent can never bring happiness. For a person who is not self-controlled will never be happy, even by possessing all the 3 worlds. O king, from you, the best of those who can give charity, I only ask 3 paces of land. By such a gift, I shall be very pleased. The way of happiness is to be fully satisfied to receive that which is absolutely needed." Thus, Bali Maharaj agreed to give charity, since what he was asking was very insignificant. But Shukracharya could understand that Vämana-Deva was Vishnu, the friend of the demigods. Shukracharya forbade Bali to give the land. Shukracharya advised Bali to withdraw his promise. Shukracharya tried to dissuade Bali Maharaj from giving land to Vaman. Finally, Shukracharya said to his disciple, "In flattering a woman to bring her under control, in joking, in a marriage ceremony, in earning one's livelihood, when one's life is in danger, in protecting cows and Brahminical culture, or in protecting a person from an enemy's hand, falsity is never condemned." Chapter 20. Bali Maharaj surrenders the universe. Despite his knowledge that Lord Vamana was cheating him, Bali Maharaj gave everything to the Lord in charity. And thus Vämana-Deva extended his body and assumed a gigantic form as Lord Vishnu. In this chapter, Bali Maharaj rejects his guru but keeps his promise. At first, Vämana-Deva took 2 steps and covered the entire universe up and down. Thus, the Lord is known as Urukrama, the great stepper. Lord Chaitanya said, the word Urukrama refers to one whose krama, or step, is great. The word krama means throwing the foot forward, that is to stay, stepping. After hearing the instructive advice of Shukracharya, Bali Maharaj became contemplative. Because it is the duty of a householder to maintain the principles of religion, economic development, and sense gratification, Bali Maharaj thought it improper to withdraw his promise to this brahmachari. To lie or fail to honor a promise given to a brahmachari is never proper, for lying is the most sinful activity. Everyone should be afraid of the sinful reactions to lying, for it is said that Mother Earth cannot even bear the weight of one sinful liar. The spreading of a kingdom or empire is temporary. If there is no benefit for the general public, such expansion has no value. Previously, all the great kings and emperors expanded their kingdoms with a regard for the welfare of the people in general. Indeed, while engaged in such activities for the benefit of the general public, eminent men sometimes even sacrificed their own lives. It is said that one who is glorious in activities is always living and never dies. Therefore, fame should be the aim of life, and even if one becomes poverty-stricken for the sake of a good reputation, then that is not a loss. Bali Maharaj thought that even if this brahmachari, Vämana-Dev, even if he were Lord Vishnu, if the Lord accepted his charity and even then again arrested him, Bali would not envy the Lord. Considering all these points, Bali Maharaj finally gave in charity everything he possessed. Lord Vamana then immediately extended himself into a universal body. By the mercy of Vämana-Dev, Bali Maharaj could see the Lord is all-pervading and that everything rests in the Lord's body. Bali Maharaj could see Vämana-Dev as the supreme Vishnu, wearing a helmet, yellow garments, the mark of Srivatsa, the Kaustuba jewel, a flower garland, and ornaments decorating his entire body. The Lord gradually covered the entire surface of the world, and by extending his body, he covered the entire sky. With his hands, Vämana-Dev covered all directions, and with his second footstep, he covered the entire upper planetary system. Therefore, there was no vacant place where the Lord could take his third footstep. Chapter 21. Bali Maharaj arrested by the Lord. This chapter describes how Lord Vishnu, desiring to advertise the glories of Bali Maharaj, arrested him for not fulfilling his promise in regard to the Lord's third step. With his second step, the Supreme Personality of Godhead reached the topmost planet of the universe, Brahmaloka, which he diminished in beauty by the effulgence of his toenails. Thus Lord Brahma, accompanied by great sages such as Marichi and the predominating deities of all the higher planets, offered humble prayers and worship to the Lord. They washed the Lord's feet and worshipped him with all paraphernalia. Riksharaj Jambavan played his bugle to vibrate the glories of the Lord. When Bali was deprived of all his possessions, the demons were very angry. But although Bali warned them not to do so, they took up weapons against Lord Vishnu. All of them, however, were defeated by the eternal associates of Lord Vishnu. And in accordance with Bali Maharaj's order, they all entered the lower planets of the universe. Understanding Lord Vishnu's purpose, Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, immediately arrested Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. When Bali Maharaj was thus reduced to a helpless position, Lord Vishnu asked him for the third step of land. Because Lord Vishnu appreciated Bali's determination and integrity, when Bali Maharaj was unable to fulfill his promise, Lord Vishnu ascertained that the place for him would be the planet Sutala, which is better than the planets of heaven. Chapter 22. Bali surrenders his life. The Supreme Personality of Godhead was pleased with the behavior of Bali Maharaj. Thus the Lord placed him on the planet Sutala, and there, after bestowing benedictions upon him, the Lord agreed to become his doorkeeper. In this chapter, Bali Maharaj surrenders his life, thus keeping his promise to the Lord, and the Lord then benedicts Bali Maharaj. Bali was extremely truthful. Being unable to keep his promise, he was very much afraid, for he knew that one who has deviated from truthfulness is insignificant in the eyes of society. An exalted person can suffer the consequences of hellish life, but is very much afraid of being defamed for deviation from truth. Bali agreed with great pleasure to accept the punishment awarded by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bali Maharaj's dynasty, there were many asuras or demons who, because of their enmity toward Vishnu, had achieved a destination more exalted than that of many mystic yogis. Bali specifically remembered the determination of Prahlad Maharaj in devotional service. Considering all these points, Bali decided to give his own head in charity as the place for Vamana's third step. Bali Maharaj also considered how great personalities give up their family relationships and material possessions in order to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, they sometimes even sacrifice their own lives for the satisfaction of the Lord, just to become his personal servants. Accordingly, by following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and devotees, Bali Maharaj perceived himself successful. While Bali, having been arrested by the ropes of Varuna, was offering prayers to the Lord, his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj appeared and described how the Supreme Personality of Godhead had delivered Bali by taking his possessions in a tricky way. While Prahlad was present, Lord Brahma and Bali's wife Vindhyavali described the supremacy of the Supreme Lord. Since Bali Maharaj had given everything to the Lord, they prayed for his release. Lord Vamana then described how a non-devotee's possession of wealth is a danger, whereas a devotee's opulence is a benediction from the Lord. Then, being pleased with Bali Maharaj, Vämana offered his disc to protect Bali and promised to remain with him. Chapter 23. The demigods regain the heavenly planets. This chapter describes how Bali Maharaj, along with his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj, entered the planet Sutala, and how the Supreme Personality of Godhead allowed Indra to re-enter the heavenly planet. Within this chapter, there is a nice conversation between Prahlad Maharaj and Lord Vämana, as well as Shukracharya's realization that there may be discrepancy in pronouncing the mantras and observing the regulative principles. And moreover, there may be discrepancies in regard to time, place, person, and paraphernalia. But when the Lord's holy name is chanted, everything becomes faultless. The great soul Bali Maharaj experienced that the highest gain in life is to attain devotional service under the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet in full surrender. Being fixed in this conclusion, his heart full of ecstatic devotion and his eyes full of tears, he offered obeisances to the personality of Godhead, and then with his associates entered the planet known as Sutala. Thus the Supreme Personality of Godhead satisfied the desire of Aditi and reinstalled Lord Indra. Prahlad Maharaj, being aware of Bali's release from arrest, then described the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within this material world. Prahlad praised the Lord for being praised and equal and supremely liberal to the devotees. Prahlad said that the Lord is just like a desire tree. Indeed, Prahlad Maharaj said that the Lord is so kind, not only to his devotees, but also to the demons. In this way, Prahlad described the unlimited causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, with folded hands, Prahlad offered his respectful obeisances to the Lord, and after circumambulating Lord Vämana, he also entered the planet Sutala in accordance with Lord Vamana's order. The Lord then ordered Shukracharya to describe Bali Maharaj's faults and discrepancies in executing the sacrificial ceremony. Shukracharya then became free from fruitive actions by chanting the holy name of the Lord, and he explained how chanting can diminish all the faults of the conditioned soul. He then completed Bali Maharaj's sacrificial ceremony. All the great saintly persons accepted Lord Vämana as the benefactor of Lord Indra because he had returned Indra to his heavenly planet. They all accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the maintainer of all affairs of the universe. Being very happy, Indra, along with his associates, placed Vämana before him and re-entered the heavenly planet in their airplane. Having seen the wonderful activities of Lord Vishnu in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj, all the demigods, saintly persons, pittas, bhuttas, and siddhas glorified Lord Vamana again and again. The chapter concludes by saying that the most auspicious function of the conditioned soul is to chant and hear about the glorious activities of Lord Vishnu, to hear about the glorious activities of Lord Vamana. Never felt like this before I chanted. How did I exist before I chanted? Now you're on my mind. You're there all the time. I can't forget that you're inside my heart. Inside my heart. Oh my Lord, I really must surrender. Oh my Lord, I simply must surrender. Things have really changed since I've been chanting. My life is not the same since I've been chanting. You've got a way about you. Now I can't live without you. I won't forget that you're inside my heart. Inside my heart. Oh my Lord, I really must surrender. Oh my Lord, I simply must surrender. To you, to you. There are 6 items of surrender: to accept everything favorable, to reject everything unfavorable, to have no other shelter, to be completely dependent, to be meek and humble. So let me go on chanting for 1,000,000 years.